Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 17th edition of Beyond the Data. Tonight we have with us, again, Warner Mendenhall, an attorney from the Akron area, and his client who had a certain situation with her, my brain is gone, with her son and the quarantine issues. So we'll be talking to them about that particular case that has concluded happily. So, Warner, do you want to get started and tell us a little bit about the situation?
I'm going to let Lisa explain the situation that she faced. And I just want to emphasize that anything I say about the law, it is what it is. But if you have a specific situation, you must contact an attorney to get their interpretation of it and how it applies to your case. But no, I'll just let Lisa take over and tell her story a little bit.
All right. Hello, everyone. On September 11th, it was a Saturday, my son had a performance with the marching band for his school. He goes to Graham Local Schools in Champaign County, Ohio. They left. Everything was fine. I got a phone call later that day stating that my son needed to stay home on Monday due to contact tracing because of one of the teachers for the band tested positive. I started asking questions. I asked if there was a seating chart, if there was a time log, if there was video, anything. And I was told no. And I asked him if he was going to look into it. And this was the band director who had called me. He told me it's not his job. He just needed to let people know to stay home. And I said, I don't believe the information's correct. And what do? He said, I need to contact the principal and get permission for my son to go to school. So Monday morning, I did just that. I did not put my son on the bus. I drove him to school to have a meeting with the principal. I asked the principal if he had a order from the state or from the health department or anything else. He said no, it's still being investigated. He said he just had phone conversations and emails back and forth with the teachers involved, and that's all he knew. He had just gotten a list of names, and my son was one of the names on that list. And I asked him if there was contact tracing, paperwork, timesheets, video, anything. He told me no also. I asked him if he was going to look into it. He told me it's not his job. I was told it's not their job from every single person I've talked to along the way, whether it's school, whether it is police, whether it is the health department. It's nobody's job, apparently, to look into this stuff. So I found out that the assistant band director got word that this teacher was sick, and all she did was print off a roster and send it in. And that's how all of this started. 13 kids were on that roster, and they were all being told to stay home with no proof that they were actually around the said teacher. But the teacher is in charge of this part of the marching band. So the assistant director automatically assumed that all the kids needed to be quarantined, which is not the case. Because after talking to several students, parents, and actually contacting the teacher that is positive, I said, are these kids really affected? Because it doesn't make sense. One, the band room is actually a 2-story tall room. It's huge. And the way the band program works and with the older kids, they're not one-on-one sitting next to each other like the assistant band director made it sound like. So none of these children needed to stay home except for one that the said teacher stated that could have been within the 15-minute time. I believe it's 15, whatever the time frame is that they use. And the rest of the kids, he said, no questions asked, should not have been quarantined or printed off or anything else. But that teacher chose not to look into it. She sent the paper with the 13 children's names on it and said they need to be home for 10 days. I went in Monday. The principal said that he has no reason to keep my son out of school. He was, in a lot of ways, like-minded. He believes a lot of the same beliefs I did. He stated that, well, he asked me if my son was sick. I said no. He said, do I feel like he needs to stay home? I said no. We went down this list of back and forth questions and talk, and he said it's not his job to keep my son out of school. He said it's the health department's job. And he said at this time, there's no investigation, that it hasn't even fully started yet other than the conversation between the teachers. And that my son can go back to class. So he actually instructed my son at that point in time to go to class, gave him permission to go to class. And we stayed and talked for about 20 minutes or so. And then I left. I got a phone call about an hour later stating that somebody had notified the health department, and the health department had then started investigating my son personally because he was in school. But at this point, there was still no health order, no paper in my hand, nothing. So after that phone call, I took it upon myself to call the health department and speak with the director of health, Gabe Jones, for Champaign County, Ohio. He knew very, very little. He didn't even have the kids' names. He didn't know the backstory to this. He knew very little information, which set up a huge red flag with me. So how are they quarantining all these kids and making phone calls on Saturday if the health department director himself knew very little about this? He just knew there was an active case going on, and that's all. I'm the parent that provided him all the information. And he actually said that later on during a personal interview when I went and actually spoke with him, that I'm the one that pretty much told him everything. So the school took it upon themselves to act as the health department, act as God, act as whatever you would want to call it. They had no orders. They had nothing. And I still to this day don't believe they have an official order. They just printed something off to hand to me. But after that phone conversation with Gabe, he said that he would look into it, yada, yada, yada. That phone conversation ended. I then got a phone call later from the assistant superintendent telling me that I need to pick up my son. And I asked the same questions. Is there paperwork? Is there video? What proof do you have? She said nothing except for a list of 13 students' names that were in the drum line, which is who this teacher is in charge of. That's the only thing that they had. The fact that this teacher was tested positive for COVID, and since he teaches these kids, then they've got to be within that criteria, right? Which doesn't make sense because they are not. And the room is huge, and I can't emphasize that enough. This is not a normal classroom. It's 2 stories tall. It's huge. So during that phone conversation, and I told her, I don't have proof. There's no orders. Everything I believe in is I can't come pick up my son. I said until there's something legal. And then at that point in time, the phone conversation was handed over to the officer, Mr. Jester, who also said I need to come pick up my son. I went down the same criteria. What proof do you have? Is there recording? Is there a seating chart? Blah, 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 blah. Nothing. And then he said, the health order was just made 20 minutes ago. So now officially you do have to come pick up your son. And I said, I can't. And then I said, what's going to happen if I don't? And he says, then we'll have to press charges, yada, yada, yada. I did not want my son in the middle of all that, nor did I want to go down that route. So I chose to drive up to the school. My son's school is 2.5 miles from my house. Within 5 minutes of me hanging up the phone, I was in the office with the principal and the officer. So in that paperwork, you'll see that it states I refused and I didn't come pick up my son. I was on school property less than 5 minutes from that phone conversation. I was actually in the office with them 5 minutes after the phone conversation. And I have all of that on video, which is what I was able to use to fight through and keep pushing with this. I have actual video proof of him stating I'm not being charged. This order was just made. It wasn't made on Saturday. It wasn't made on Sunday. It wasn't even made Monday morning. It was made at early afternoon on Monday, supposedly. And he said that I need to take my son home. We went back and forth. There was no proof. He's the one that, and then once again, I was told it was just a roster. And he even told me it's not his job to investigate this. It's not his job. It's nobody's job, supposedly, except for the assistant band director who took it upon herself to print off a roster sheet and create this entire mess. So I was told by the principal to go speak with Gabe, and Mr. Jester, the officer, also said, yes, go get permission from the health department. Your son can come back. But If he can't, then he has to stay home in quarantine, or you'll have charges pressed against you. So, and I asked him again, I said, at this time, am I in trouble? And he said, only if you bring your son back. And I said, fine, we'll deal with things from there. So I took my son, I left, I went straight to the health department. I left my son in my truck because I didn't want them to say, oh, should be quarantined, he should be at home, he's not allowed around people. Didn't want to go and fight that battle either. So I left him in my truck. I went inside. Gabe the health director was not even in his office. His secretaries didn't know where he was at first. And one of the ladies said, oh, in his free time, he likes to go down to the gym to work out, which I thought was funny, in his free time, because shouldn't he be investigating all this? And this is 2:00, if not later in the afternoon. His free time. So in this office, there's actually a community gym. Walked down there. He's working out. I opened the door and I said, we need to talk now. He's in his gym clothes and everything else. And he's like, okay, let's walk back to the office. And like, he keeps a change of clothes even there at the office, which I thought was just so weird that the director of health has so much free time to go work out. So, and during that walk back to his office, I said, my son is in the truck because I didn't want to bring him in because he's technically quarantined. He went like this with his hand and he said, he can come in. It's not a problem. I said, we don't wear masks and he's not vaccinated. He said, it's not a problem. That was another huge red flag of mine. How is it that my son is a threat and can't be in school and supposedly has to be quarantined, but you're giving me permission with a smile on your face and even laughing about it, saying, it's not a problem, he can come in. And like I said, I told him he was not vaccinated, he's not masked, nothing. Gabe didn't care. So I got my son, came back. Gabe had the director of nursing with him also. And we went to a conference room. All four of us sat in the conference room together. Unmasked. Me and my son are not vaccinated. Nothing. They could care less, even though my son was technically supposed to be quarantined. And I went down this whole line. And I have about half of that interview recorded also. But I was told by the director of health himself and the director of nursing, it's not their job to question the school. So any teacher could print off a list and send it in and quarantine these kids. And it's not their job, according to the health or the director, to look into it unless there's questions or whatnot. So I'm the person with questions. So he's like, well, I guess I could go down to the school and go talk to him and stuff like that. And I took it upon myself and I said, have you guys talked? We need a phone conversation. So I got my phone out and we contacted them. And we contacted the teacher. And the teacher himself said out of 13 kids, there was only one in question that possibly could have met the criteria to be quarantined. But he still questioned whether or not it was true that he needed to be quarantined. But he said the other kids, and specifically said my son's name, did not need to be quarantined, should not have been on that list. And he also went as far as telling me that the assistant band director wasn't even out in the classroom. She was in her office, which is part of the band room and has a window. But she was not right there. So she would have been guessing on how close he was with these kids, walking back and forth and whatnot. But she's supposedly in the band room doing her own paperwork. She's also a teacher. So that was another huge red flag. How is she able to do everything she's doing in her office, sitting quite a distance away from where these kids are, but yet she's able to figure out what 6 feet is? So we went back and forth. The health director talked to the teacher and so forth, and it was a useless conversation. They weren't going to change anything because they said that the assistant band director would be the person who would have to have written a letter stating, taking back what she did. And she wouldn't. I contacted the school. Nothing was done. I even had the assistant band director call in while we were having this interview with the health board. And she admitted, and she used the word guessing so many times, I lost count. I was starting to write tallies every time she used the word guessing. And she also stated she doesn't have a tape measure. And she said, better safe than sorry. So she's like, he's in charge of the drum kids. Here's the roster for the drum kids. I printed it off, and that's what I handed it in. And then she got very irate. She was very upset that we were bothering her. And that was pretty much the gist of that conversation. So once again, I was told it's not my job. I was told by every single person. And I kept my kid home, and I sent him back after 10 days. And this is where we are. And after those 10 days, there was a board meeting for school. And at that point, I heard nothing from the police department, nothing. That took place in the middle of the month when I found out I was being charged. But it was after I went to the school board meeting with my concerns. I got other parents to go. And this is a school board meeting for a very small town, probably not even on most maps. Nobody shows up to these board meetings because it's a good old boys club out here. It's the same generation of people year after year, and they just kind of do their own thing. And we don't really question it that much because everybody that works at the school is either a family member or your neighbor or something like that. We're just a very small farming community. But this time I did have questions, and I had people show up with me. We talked. We shared the videos. We kind of got it stirred up a little bit. And that's when I was given I was told that I was being taken to court a couple of days after that. And I actually went back again, and the school board chose to host a special secret meeting type thing, but I got word that the meeting was taking place. They did not advertise it even. And I showed up with another parent. We videotaped the entire thing because they're supposed to videotape their meetings, and they didn't. So I videotaped it for them. And I was charged then. I was charged all of a sudden. I thought it was funny almost that once I started making a stink with the school and the school board and asking questions and pushing my story on social media, that I was pretty much told to be quiet. Because I had an officer show up at my door with a summons to court stating that I violated the health department, their rules with my son.
He was 5 minutes. That's how long he was supposed to be home. Oh, we've got some back there. I think it was okay. Now we're good. Yeah, but it's all of 5 minutes that he was in the school from the time you were ordered to take him out and when you took him out.
Because I was told on the phone after, because that phone conversation, I said, I can't come pick him up. It's against what I believe in. I can't. And then that's when the officer got involved on that phone call and said, well, a health department order was just issued 20 minutes ago. So by law, you do have to come pick up your son. And I said, I can't. He needs to stay in school. I fear for him if he comes home. He excels in the classroom, absolutely excels. Online, he still gets his work done, but there's such a huge difference. And not just with work, but with any child. When you take them out of that social atmosphere, every child changes. And I didn't want that for my son. We went through that last year. I'm not willing to go through it again. But once they told me that I would have to come pick him up where I was going to be, I did.
Okay, so it is Warner's mic. That's a little echoey there. All right. So, and that is, I mean, this does just sound like it's retaliation here. I mean, that was, just minutes that you were there.
Within minutes. And even when I was in the school, I asked him directly. I was sitting within a foot of this officer. And I said, am I being charged right now? No, Miss Crane, no, you're not. You are not being charged. If you bring your son back to school tomorrow, you will. But as of right now, no. And he even says in the video that I have, don't make me charge you. So there was no charges. And even that paper they handed me, all it was a template. There was no signature, no nothing.
That's what I was just going to ask. This health order, who supposedly issued the health order?
It was something the school, I believe, printed off because I had somebody reach out to me and say, look at it. All it is a template because there's the dates in my child's name is bold. And he said, And she said that is how you can tell it's a template, because that's what's left blank that they fill in and print off and give to you.
Right, but so it should be signed at the bottom.
Nothing signed. Nothing.
Okay, so then that's not even a health order, because the state of the ORC says it has to be signed. Yes, there is a template that all health officials use throughout the state. They might vary slightly depending on the reason or the time of quarantine. It's what the dates are there for. But it always has to be a signature. Whoever is placing the child in quarantine has to sign. So if they're not doing so, then I mean, that's.
And I guess believe
if we go through another toilet paper shortage, you can use it again.
Yeah.
That's the best.
More than one parent said they're seeing the same templates at their school, that nothing is being signed. These are just templates we believe as parents that the school have, so they can just print off, fill in the name, and send them out and act like the health department.
And you, are you there, Carrie?
Okay.
Well, I don't know if she's hearing me, but one question you said you said it was 13 students, right?
Yes.
That were quarantined. So I was just looking up on coronavirus.ohio.gov, and you said it's Graham local?
Graham Local School, Champaign County, Ohio. Yeah,
so I see here that there are 13 cumulative student cases in Graham Local and 8 cumulative cases in staff. Were there any other instances where there was anything COVID related in your school district besides this situation?
During that time, I'm not sure.
Not just during that time. Unfortunately, they do it cumulative, and like everything with data on the state website, they just kind of like overwrite everything. So they like to cumulative.
That part is funny too. At both board meetings, certain board members were asked questions for numbers, and then the one board meeting, the director of health came and were asked numbers too. Nobody had an actual number. They're like, oh, well, the week prior, it was about this. Nobody had set numbers. Everybody was guessing. I had heard there were other cases and a couple of other teachers, but also they could have been out for other sicknesses or vacation or whatnot, but we were just told there were these absences, and in that mix, some were COVID related. So
that is insane to me that we've allowed educators and everybody but health officials to act as health officials. I just don't understand what we're doing.
No, and during the last board meeting, the director of health actually came out and said, per state law, the schools do not have to contact trace, quarantine, or anything. It's not their job, and I have that on video. And I also have it on video. Schools are being paid to help, because he looked right over and he says, we have contracts if you would like to help, because he said that we won't be able to do this. We don't have enough staff. So he said in that video, I sure hope that you guys continue to help, and we have funding available.
Absolutely. They should do just like every.
Can you hear me okay, Catherine? Carrie's fading a little bit on my.
Yeah, she is breaking up there. Yes, now we can hear you, Warner. So we've got one person back, and we've lost. Technology is grand.
Department.
Yeah.
All right. So hopefully Carrie can get her connection back here. But so we've got the story on getting to the and it was a criminal.
But
yeah.
Okay, maybe Carrie will log back in. Are you getting echo now from me at all, or are you good?
No, now you're good again.
Okay. I tried. You saw me. I tried to plug in some headphones, but then that didn't work. I couldn't switch it over, so I apologize if you're getting any echo here. And I changed the mic settings, so maybe that'll help. But I mean, there's so many interesting things here for me as an attorney. Can I share my screen a little bit? Is that possible?
Sure. You can do down at the bottom. There's a share, and once it pops up on my screen, I can put it up for you as well.
Okay, I'm gonna grab. I think this is it. Okay. what do you see there? Okay, I see it up there.
Yep. You can select just the window you're interested in as well. I'm
not sure how to do that. I try anyway, whatever. What you see here, I mean, school officials really don't have any right to enforce health orders. I mean, that's the reality here. And that's part of what we're going after in some of our cases. You can see here, this is the violation that she was charged under. No person shall violate any rule the Director of Health or Department of Health adopts, or any order the Director or Department of Health issues under this chapter. So there has to be an order or a rule. You see that there. And in this case, there was no order or rule. There were just simply some guidelines. And let me switch over to another. This is what they were calling an order. Let me switch to that one. So you can see here, this was an order that was issued, and of course it's unsigned. So it's not official unless it's signed. And it says communicable disease team. I mean, this isn't a Director of Health. It's certainly not Ohio Department of Health. So, and these are simply guidelines here. So none of this was met. And we filed a motion to dismiss on this. Let me see if I can find that. Oh, yeah, that's the motion I was pointing to earlier. So we filed a motion to dismiss on that basis. And thankfully, actually, the prosecution and the judge agreed with us. And filed a motion to dismiss on that basis. An echo. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, now you're back again.
Okay. So, they simply, school board, it's outside of their power to do what they did. So that, that's where I am. I mean, something also that is interesting is the question as to whether or not there was some retaliation here. This is very concerning, when Lisa's exercising her right to association, her right to redress grievances at a school board, and then a charge shows up. And, even prior to the corona crisis that we're in, I guess, and we are in a legal crisis, I will tell you that. I don't know that we're in a healthcare crisis so much. Well, I shouldn't say that. We are in a healthcare crisis, but I don't know that it's corona that's causing it. But we're certainly in a legal crisis right now in terms of state, local, and federal governments overstepping the powers that they have and just assuming that they can enforce this stuff. And we've seen this before. We've seen parents that have attended school board meetings to complain about various issues, have retaliation against them personally. They may have been barred from a school, and even retaliation against their children. They may have been barred from participating on a track or a football team. So we had that issue in North Canton with a high jumper. The dad was concerned about safety at the track practices and meets. Went and talked. Next thing you know, his kid's off the high jump squad, pole vault squad. It was pole vaulting, and that kind of stuff is petty authoritarianism, and it's important that we all stand up to that. So that's really something. But we're obviously happy with what ended up happening in court Friday. This got resolved fairly quickly. And Lisa and I were talking earlier before this broadcast how, we literally parachuted in, looked at a few things, realized there was a problem, filed a motion to dismiss on that problem. But we had some fallback issues. Just for the viewers, one of the key things that people, that due process requires is notice. So had this motion to dismiss not succeeded, we would have gone after the notice issue because we don't think this was ever an order, but certainly there was no notice of this order. She hadn't been served with it. How can she violate an order that she has no notice of? So, that, and the notice apparently, if this is a notice, was only issued about a half an hour before you picked up your child anyway.
Yep.
So there's a lot of this is very problematic about how this was handled. And even and I'm just sitting here thinking in my head about the issue of whether it's retaliatory or not. That kind of complaint we've also filed. They are very complex cases. They are filed in federal court. It's under a civil rights statute called 42 USC 1983, which takes your right to association, your right to redress grievances from the federal constitution and applies it to the states. So then we can go to federal court and vindicate your rights in federal court. Those types of lawsuits, though, typically they can take years to resolve. They're not as quick as what we just experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's very concerning what happened here.
It is.
I think for the listeners more generally, I mean, like I said, we've seen local bodies in particular reacting to limit people's participation in their local government more and more. And I've had a number of clients get letters that would bar them from a council meeting, mainly for trying to redress grievances or to speak to the council. And I think that's a scary thing. This was growing before this legal crisis that we're in now. And, after we saw the boards of education ask Merrick Garland to intervene because of all the parents protesting, I think we're going to be seeing more of this. I have represented people that have been charged criminally for disrupting public meetings. And I'm sorry, I keep looking at my screen because I'm thinking about some things over here. But we have successfully defended people for that. And, we have a fairly simple theme, and it is simply that, we're in a big and robust democracy with a lot of competing voices. And sometimes democracy gets loud. And if you're a public figure, and if you're on one of these boards, you need to deal with that. If you don't have a tough enough skin to deal with how loud our democracy gets, then you need to exit. And we can think back historically where democracy has gotten loud, and whether you believe with these protests historically or not, I think we can all agree that they've changed our country. Women's suffrage would be one of the first ones. Of course, the abolitionists would be before that. And then we can move on to pacifists in World War I, World War II, their protests. And we know there were arrests and convictions and imprisonments there. Move on to the African-American civil rights movement. We know how loud that got. Hundreds of thousands of people marching in Washington, the Vietnam War. Unfortunately, in that instance, we had people jailed, we had people shot. But it helped to change our country and bring to the fore the problems with the Vietnam War, which eventually led to us getting out of it. For gay rights, the Stonewall protests in New York City, and then protests after the HIV crisis began with gay Americans wanting to get treatment and wanting to, and they were concerned about quarantine issues, and obviously Fauci had some involvement in that situation as well. And then, protests against the Iraq War. So all, the protesters, if we think back historically, eventually we come to see that, hey, they're right. The abolitionists were right. We shouldn't enslave people. The suffragettes were right. Women should be able to participate in the democracy. The civil rights, likewise, the civil rights protests, the same thing. The gay protests, look, we shouldn't discriminate against people because of their sexual orientation. We are a free country, and we may not like everything that's happening in our free country, but we're all free, and we need to keep it that way. So, I don't know, long explanation.
So there's actually was a comment right here about one of these situations happening. I mean, what can parents do? I mean, I've heard this story again and again and again of either board meetings being canceled or emptying the venue.
Secret.
Yep, or having a secret, or doing all these shady things, or preventing people from speaking, different things like that. So
our school board started that also. We are allotted only 3 minutes. We can only speak once, and we're not allowed to ask direct contact, like direct questions, because they're not going to, by law, by their bylaws or whatever, they don't have to answer us back. So pretty much you're standing up there and talking to a wall for 3 minutes, and then you're done.
Well, it's a little bit complicated, as all of this is, and people who've been thrown out of a board meeting. I mean, I'd have to look at what happened there exactly. Generally speaking, though, we have an open meetings law in Ohio, so people have to have notice of the meeting. They have to have the ability to at least observe the meeting. The right to speak at a meeting can be more limited, actually. I can tell you that in the city of Akron, we actually passed a charter amendment to preserve and maintain and to establish a right to speak to our council here. School boards are a little different. We don't have a charter with your local town or city may have a charter, so you can require public speaking at your meeting if you make a charter change. School boards are a little different, but if they're going to allow public comment, they have to allow it for everybody, and they have to do it even-handedly. I can tell you, Lisa, that I have seen limitations. Those have been upheld. They can limit it to 3 minutes or 5 minutes. But like I said, any of those situations, would have to be looked at individually to see what exactly happened. I mean, it's terrifying that a local board or government is going to throw its citizens out. And that is also probably a pretty clear violation of the open meetings law.
So there's a law that's the open meetings law. It would be the one that would be most governing these situations.
Right.
And that, does that allow for people to just be able to observe like on a video screen, or does that also mean that they can physically be there during the board meeting? Because I would imagine that might be one of their arguments is, oh, we can do it, but we'll just do it on Zoom or whatever. Can they do that? Like I said,
I hate to be vague about this, but I'd have to look at the particular situation and the particular rules and how they're applied. But the meeting, just in some way, the meeting has to be open. I suppose it could be through Zoom. I'd have to look at each one individually, because I know there's complicating factors. There was something else you said, Catherine. I'm sorry, I missed it.
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, so what would be the action then of somebody if there's a situation that comes up again where a board meeting is happening, where they're specifically rejecting parents from being allowed to come in if they aren't wearing masks? That seems to be one that seems to be a little more popular these days, that people are trying to come in without a mask and they get kicked out. Or
here's the problem. Here's the problem, and I think we all understand this, but the problem is the meeting's happening right now, and you're thrown out right now. So I can't. If I knew you were going to be thrown out ahead of time, I might be able to get an injunction against the school board, but they're never going to let you know ahead of time. That's just probably not going to happen. It might, though. You do have a cause of action after the fact, but those lawsuits should be brought. The problem with the courts on the civil side in particular is how long it takes to win. And I'm not saying don't bring the lawsuits. I think they should be brought. The more that can be brought, and they can cost the school board or the public entity. There's some provisions to recoup some fees and costs from them. And then, of course, they're going to pay their own lawyers, which is probably the most costly aspect of it, is the lawyers that they pay for with taxpayer money And then the other thing that comes up, I think, with that is that you have to hold them accountable politically. So the lawsuit at least gives you a basis to say, even though the lawsuit may not be resolved for a year, you can at least say, hey, you guys are getting sued over and over and over again. You're not meeting the public meetings guidelines. Public records is a whole other story. But you're not meeting the public meetings issues. You're not following the Open Meetings Act. And it's costing us money. And it's wasting our time. And you've got school personnel in depositions and in court when they should be teaching kids. So I think those can lead to political outcomes. It may take a while for the legal outcome for the legal rights to be vindicated, but the effort to vindicate those rights can lead to political outcomes as well.
In a more near-term thing. So if you have a large number of parents, to say you have a situation where you have a meeting where the school board says, oh, you parents who are coming in without masks, we're not going to allow you in here. You can't do anything in that minute. You have to leave, I'm assuming. I mean, because of trespass laws, I understand.
The mask issue is a little different, I think, because the mask issue, you would know ahead of time that they're blocking people from coming in from masks. So it's possible if they started to do that in your district, it is possible that we could get a restraining order to say, look, school board, you're not a health official. There's no, where's the health department order that allows you to block people from this public meeting? You have no way to mandate a medical device such as a mask. You have no power to do it, no authority, no expertise. So that situation, again, we'd have to look at it, and you could possibly do that. And we are looking at the mask issue. We've got kind of a way to cut through to this. Some of that's actually similar to what we're doing in the Miami University case.
All right, before we get to the Miami University case, to finish the thought I had there about the mask situation, where you didn't know ahead of time, and then they suddenly start deciding they're going to kick you out. You can't do anything in the moment, but if enough of those parents come back and start suing the school, you might actually get the school to react to those lawsuits more quickly than the lawsuits themselves. Because they're just going to say, sorry, we won't do that anymore because we're getting sued like crazy and losing taxpayer money, and everybody's getting angry at us. So it might be able to move in that way.
And I think even going back to Lisa's case, I think part of what started to happen, we sort of had an indication from the judge. I think you heard that, Lisa, where he said, we don't want 60 Minutes down here.
Yeah.
I
got a laugh out of that.
That was a funny comment, but they clearly had researched me, and they had clearly figured out, and I'm sure they had researched you, Lisa, and that we've got a little bit of a presence out here that is going to capture some attention. And they did not want that attention. And that was certainly part of it. So the public sentiment does have a role to play here, even in Lisa's case. I think somewhere that was in the background, and I think that comment really revealed that to us, that he's concerned about the perception. And so good, everybody should be concerned about the perception. Yeah. So anyway.
All right. Do you want to talk about that Miami University suit that I've heard a little bit about? Or you still have something?
I'll go. I want one more thing to say to parents or whoever's listening. And I think parents are understanding this, but everyone who calls us from a school district, and we've had calls from across the state, probably from about 10 school districts. And we're probably going to sue at least 5 of those. And what we said to everybody who calls us is, look, you can't afford the legal battle on your own. If you're a concerned parent, get a group together. And we can't afford the legal battle. I can't afford to maintain my practice, obviously, if we're not able to pay the salaries around here. So, get a group together. If you break up the cost among multiple families, it's not going to be that high. And, that way we can fund it. I can feed my family. You can still feed your family, and we can hold the public accountable. So right now, at least 5 school districts, we've got parents organizing, and we'll be talking. We're going to some public meetings to talk to parents about how that works, but it's very hard to go on your own. And Lisa, luckily, had the idea of putting up a GoFundMe and, getting some donations, and that helps. That helps to fund these. So we've got to hang together, or we're going to hang separately. That's Ben Franklin's old quote. If we hang together, we can fight this. I think it's really starting to come together. So I'll go ahead on to the Miami University one if I can find it here. Oh, here it is. Okay. So Ohio has some interesting things going on, and we sued Miami University under the Ohio Constitution and Ohio law. Let me see let's see if it'll share this window. It just tells me, it just gives me a chance to share the screen. It's not letting me.
Oh, it doesn't give you a list of windows you can share?
Yeah, it's not giving me a list of windows. Let me close this all down so I can just have one open.
Yeah, and make it full screen, and that will definitely make it easier on the eyes.
I see. Okay, I'll do a full screen. Now I got to get back to our meeting. Where'd it go? Sorry, everybody. I'm just a little bit novice at this. Share. There we go. Do you see the document there? How does that look on your end? Is that okay?
Yes, definitely. That's definitely much more legible.
Okay, great. That makes sense. So this is a case that we filed against Miami University. I'll just walk through the complaint and explain it a little bit. We've asked for a declaratory relief, which means that we've asked the court to declare that what they're doing is unconstitutional and illegal under Ohio law. We've asked for injunctive relief, which means we want them to stop doing it now. And we've got constitutional and statutory basis for this. So they have instituted a mandate, and you see the dates there. First vaccine dose by the 25th. That's not far from today, and fully vaccinated by the 22nd. And they're threatening disciplinary action. And I'm going to come back to that as we walk through this. But remember that word disciplinary action, because what that is coercion. So we have a liberty interest in the Ohio Constitution. And we have similar interests in the federal Constitution, but we've sued solely under the Ohio Constitution and Ohio law. So let me run down this a little bit. This just describes the parties, who they are, declaratory relief. This is Section 1, Article 1 of the Ohio Constitution. The case law has held that section and article give us the right to refuse medical treatment. And that's important. Here's a case about that. It's Steele versus Hamilton County Community Mental Health Board. And this is the quote from that case, which I love this quote. Liberty interests are infringed upon when a person is medicated against his or her wishes. Well, gosh, that was obvious to all of us before, wasn't it? This type of intrusion compromises one's liberty interest in personal security, bodily integrity, and autonomy. So this is an interpretation of our Constitution. This is what a judge has found. It's not unlimited, and your right is not unlimited. But the burden is not on us to show that right has to be abrogated. It's actually on the government. So the government needs to come in, and it has to show a compelling government interest. And that doesn't mean they can just make a decision and inject everybody. It means they have to prove that that injection is very important for the community and that it's going to do some good, that it's not going to be essentially worthless. And right now, we know from the data coming out that despite the fact that people are getting injected, they are still carrying the virus. It doesn't stop you from getting sick. It doesn't stop you from spreading the disease. And now, I mean, it doesn't even seem to protect against death from some of the things that I'm hearing. So, and even more than that, it's showing that the vaccinated people have higher viral loads. So the information coming out about this vaccine is that it doesn't stop the spread and it doesn't seem to work. Well, where's the compelling government interest in that if it's not protecting the individual very much and it's not protecting society at all because people who are vaccinated carry such a viral load? The idea that there's a compelling government interest withers away. Yeah, go to the next thing here. There's a risk-benefit analysis. So, we all under this case get to choose whether the risks and how the risks and benefits should be weighed. Do the benefits override the risks or not? And more, it seems like they do not. And I mean, particularly with younger people who don't get very sick from this virus, particularly with people who've recovered from COVID and have an immunity that seems to be much, much stronger than the vaccine. So this idea, and this is really important because everyone says, oh, Jacobson. And I know that's a shorthand, but Jacobson is a case from the US Supreme Court that everybody cites to saying, oh yeah, government can do this. Oh, sure. Well, Jacobson was decided at a time when our constitutional law was not as developed as it is now. And they simply had to say, we need to do this as a community. But Jacobson, of course, was about smallpox. Smallpox is deadly. 30% of the people die with that. It's a very different situation. And at that time, this idea here about compelling interest was not as well developed in the courts. Now it's developed. So we believe that the government has to show a compelling interest, and that interest is less and less likely to be found compelling as this vaccine appears to be less and less effective to the point of ridiculousness now where, like I said, apparently people who've been vaccinated carry higher viral loads. So there's more here. This is another thing, the least intrusive means. So what's the least intrusive means of accomplishing the state's interests? Well, first of all, there's treatments to COVID. So those treatments need to be accounted for. And none of that is being accounted for right now. And, the Jacobson decision, I think is probably going to be updated here thanks to the legal crisis we're in. So yes, survivability rate, we had some of that in here. Risks out. We're talking about our particular plaintiffs here. Risks outweigh the benefits. We go into the amount of efficacy that the vaccine has. And let's move on down here. So that's the constitutional issue. In short, it can be a little more complicated than that, but that's it in short. The other thing that we have in Ohio that is kind of unique that we don't see used very much is the fact that our criminal laws can also provide the basis for a civil lawsuit. So we have a criminal law that about coercion, and it's very interesting. No person may coerce another from either taking an action or not taking an action when the person has a legal freedom of choice by taking or threatening to take or withhold official action. Now, this mainly deals with our government officials. That's why it's the state schools that we're targeting, because these are state officials. So they are committing a crime under Ohio law called coercion. And we can sue civilly, which we have in this lawsuit, to hold them responsible for taking an official action. They threaten to fire, suspend, punish employees if they don't do something, which they should have freedom of choice, under the Ohio and even the federal Constitution. But, I just talked about freedom of choice under Ohio. So people do have freedom of choice in our analysis under the constitutional provision that we have, and they cannot be coerced into or bullied into not exercising their freedom of choice. So that may hold the officials liable for coercion, civilly liable. We don't have the power to bring a prosecution, but we do have this possibility of holding them liable to a criminal statute. And then, of course, I believe this was Senate Bill 22 that then became Revised Code 379204. This obviously addresses directly state institutions of higher education. They cannot require a vaccine without full approval, and they cannot discriminate against people who have not received a vaccine. So we think that this also covers these employees of Miami University and all state college and university employees. So that was very helpful. So that's it. It's pretty simple. Everybody's saying, well, Pfizer's approved, and that would get around that. But we have actually done a pretty hard. We made a pretty good effort. And had one of our investigators try to reach out to find where Comirnaty is available in Ohio. And we've had some volunteer effort along those lines. As far as I know, we've contacted about 50 pharmacies and hospitals, and not a single one has Comirnaty available. And generally, from what I know beyond that, beyond our personal investigation, is that it's not available. And Catherine, you may know differently than me at this point, but that's what we've seen so far.
No, I don't believe it is available. Carrie would know the best, but I do not believe it is available at this time.
So if you don't have an available vaccine under that statute, you can't treat people who are unvaccinated differently. It's pretty simple. So that is it. This was another interesting thing. Their mandate required defendants who did get an exemption to agree to comply with testing, which we believe unlawfully limits their right to religious exemption. And I'm going to put a little caveat. Religious exemption is simply a sincerely held belief. You don't have to be Catholic or Jewish or Muslim. You could have a sincerely held belief that's a secular belief, and that is going to qualify under religious exemption, which I think people don't understand that. We've talked to lots and lots of people to try to make it clear. You don't have to necessarily be Christian, to get that religious exemption. You can just have a secular, non-religious, but sincerely held belief about your own body's autonomy, your bodily autonomy, and that should be enough. I will say that we have had contact this last week with a number of students from Miami University. And we don't have a lawsuit for the students yet, but we learned that the university is denying some religious exemptions by students. That is extremely concerning. The students, we've had contact with the parents. We're trying to get information to them that they have a legal right here that is being violated. And I know that some of the students who were denied actually went out and got vaccinated after that. And, they didn't know where to turn, and they didn't want to miss school, and went ahead and got vaccinated. So the word is not out there that you can defy these illegal mandates. But we're trying to get it out there. So any parents of University of Miami students, we are working on that right now. So here's the last element of this is it's the limitation on authority. This is a little bit nuanced, I guess, but I think people understand that schools have a job to educate and keep our students safe, but they don't have health authority. They have no expertise. I said this earlier. They have no expertise and they have no health authority. So it is limited. It's the Ohio Department of Health and local health departments that can issue orders and force people to do things, but we don't have any of those. So, this school acting on its own, mandating health intervention or disease intervention is way out of bounds. And the health departments have been very precisely limited in terms of what they can do by the state legislature. So how can a school, this is just the question we're trying to get a court to answer, how can a school exercise authority that even the Department of Health can't exercise? So we're going to find this all out. But we have some good case law on that. You see this word public policy here. We think public policy is very clear. It's limited the health departments in terms of what they can do. And the schools certainly have no more authority than a health department and should not be involved in this type of decision that involves a general disease issue that everybody faces, not just students. So we're asking for injunctive relief. That means that we need them to stop. And hopefully we'll get there. And hopefully we're actually going to ask them to pay the attorney fees and costs. Maybe that'll happen, maybe that won't. But we certainly are, very appreciative of the people who have now put their jobs on the line to stand up to Miami University. These are very brave people. And I think we all have to respect that. Lisa, you too. We respect anyone who stands up. Oh my goodness. Without you standing up and without these employees standing up, I don't get to make these arguments. I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs. Well, not that, I got to make a living, but I want to make these arguments. I see these violations. I see this excessive, government overreach, and I want to do something about it. We can't do something about it without people who are willing to put their jobs on the line, people who are willing to face possible prosecution like Lisa. And it's scary. Lisa, how did you feel when you got charged?
I went through, I think, every emotion there was out there. But as a mom, I knew what I had to do. And as a good friend told me, we're making history. We are setting a foundation for everyone else that is going through the same thing or like-minded problems to be able to use their rights, to be able to fight back, to be able to protect not only their kids, but their families.
Yeah.
So with that suit that you filed against Miami University, are any of those arguments applicable to either private businesses or military, things in that range? Because there were some questions in here about Fed workers in the military because they're undergoing the same kind of mandates, and then there are the private business ones. So some of those arguments obviously can't apply to those two things, the local Ohio ones, but can others?
Right. The interesting thing about the federal quote unquote mandate is there isn't one. So there is no OSHA mandate. So I don't know what all these private businesses are doing. They are stepping in the shoes of government and they're carrying out a government, I don't know what it is, government press release. They're carrying out a government press release, because that's all there is right now is a press release by Biden.
So that would be a court case then, kind of similar, as I understand, to Lisa's situation, where there's no actual law in place, no signature on it, no teeth behind it.
Right. And are you? Sorry, I'm trying to pull something up on my screen. I hope I'm not messing up here.
No, I have to put it up for you, so okay. I can see it whenever you get it up there. I can see it, but it won't go up until.
Okay. We have some case law. It's an old lawsuit that it's called Marsh versus Alabama. It's a U.S. Supreme Court case, and it bars private parties from acting as de facto governments. And that case also found that the company that did that acted as a government violated the Sherman Antitrust Act. So it's an old law. It deals with a company town. But we think that case can be updated and brought forward into the present environment where these private parties are carrying out a government press release. I don't know, it's so unheard of, the way private companies are acting, that it is unique, but that's one of the cases that we think can be updated, and it may be really important how the court interprets that case for the present environment. So that would deal with the companies. The military, and we have heard a couple of things from military folks. Unfortunately, one of them is, and I've got to follow up with the parents on this. We have a young man who took the vaccine and was injured. His heart, he got the myocarditis, and they're mustering him out. And he's very young, and he wants to serve the military. He wants to serve our country. And I think the military has a responsibility to do everything in its power to help him get better and keep him in the military instead of just ejecting him. They caused this, and that's a very complicated situation. But I don't know how many young men are going through that, but I know there were very few COVID-19 critical illnesses in the military. They're in good shape. They're generally younger. And I think that the vaccine injuries will probably exceed the number of harmful COVID illnesses that occur, if it hasn't already. But so we're looking at that situation. I think I'm not a military attorney, and there are military courts, and there's a whole code of justice in the military. Though one of my partners here served in the Navy, as a JAG officer. That means the Judge Advocate General for the Navy. So I'll have to have him get on that issue, because I'm probably not competent, to defend the military guys. But our soldiers need help, and we're here to look at situations that come forward. Like I said, I do have an ex-JAG officer here, and another one of our attorneys served in the National Guard, not in the legal side though. But we're very interested in looking at those cases. I know there has been a case filed already that's out there. I think Frontline Doctors filed that lawsuit within the last couple of weeks. So I'm very curious to look at that and what's happening there. So sorry I can't add more clarity there. I think I added more heat than light, but we're going to be looking at it closely. Well,
I have been approached several times in all of those situations, with the military situation, with federal workers situation, obviously private company situation, trying to find ways. So what I'm hearing from you is you guys are thinking about that and might be filing something in the future.
Yeah, one of the federal employees are different than military. Let's try to get that clear at least. Federal employees have, we have some clearer pathways that than in the military. I mean, obviously, if you're in the military, you got to take orders, whatever. There's a whole different set of problems in the military. With the federal workers, I think we've got a pathway on that, and we have been talking to some federal workers already.
Well, should I send more your way? Because there are definitely more.
Here's what I want to say, Catherine. I'm going to apologize publicly here to all the people I haven't been able to get back with. We are trying. We started covidlawcast.com to at least share what we're doing. My hope is, this is a very small firm. We've got 5 lawyers. We've got a couple of assistants. We've got a couple of investigators. We have a limit in terms of what we can do. I'm hoping that we can get more lawyers involved and interested in these issues. I think it's one of the most fascinating legal issues in my lifetime. So just from a curiosity stance, I would hope lawyers would dive into this. We have a chance to make law for the country. So, it may be bad, it may be good, but we're going to make law one way or another. I guarantee that. So that's stuff that, normally for a lawyer is very enticing. Just from an intellectual stance, it's enticing. I mean, I will say, I think this issue has, for me, got a moral element to it. I think that the violations of our bodily integrity are immoral, but I'm litigating it on case law. I obviously have feelings about all this, but we're going to litigate this very straight. We're going to litigate it, as you can see, based on very clear, logical, legal reasoning, and we're going to stay in our lane. Could I rail against this? And do I rail against this privately? Sure, but we're going to stay in a very logical, legal framework. What I've learned to do throughout my entire career, and I'm not going to get into the emotions of it, but I will say some of what I see happening is immoral, besides being illegal.
So it didn't answer the question. Do you want more people calling you?
They're welcome to call. They're welcome to call. I will keep trying, but I can tell you right now, unfortunately, I'm so far behind. I think I have 80 calls backed up right now. There's, if you just say a minute a call, it's an hour and a half, and it's not a minute a call. Everybody has a story. So let's call it times 10. So 800 minutes. Now I know I have a tracker on my communications, and last week I spent 30 hours on this issue on the phone, and I still have 80 calls to make. And the week before was 29, so we're averaging around that level. That's really hard, and that's just me. That doesn't count what everybody else did. That's just me, and I know everybody else has been active out here as well. So it's a strain on the firm, and it's a strain, but we're here. We'll do what we can. I wish we could help everybody. We can't, but hopefully, let's find some other lawyers. We'll if people know lawyers that are willing to do this, I would put a list up of all the lawyers in Ohio that are willing to do something, so that people can quickly, just try to find somebody. And like I said, the other thing that we've done is we're trying to get people to band into groups, because then I can represent thousands of people in the groups. Like these students at Miami, yes, I've had a parent want me to represent just their kid. I don't think we're going to do that. We're going to represent however many are willing to come together as a group. So we have one lawsuit, multiple plaintiffs against the university. That would be my plan at this point.
So the recommendation would be, if you are a federal worker or a military individual, or even in private companies, it would be
Group
find
together.
others
Yep.
Find others and then come and approach you, because the more there are, the cheaper it gets per person, and the more likely you can be able to handle it.
Right. Exactly.
With the federal,
I tell you, the other thing I'm going to say here, I've been shocked by who's called. I won't name the companies in particular, but let's put it this way. We've heard from employees so far from 3 pharma companies. Are you kidding me? I'll leave it at that.
I've heard from public health officials. I've heard from people who work for like Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer. I mean, yes.
Okay, well, you're naming some companies. I'm not going to name the companies that we're hearing from. I've got some, I got to try to keep things, I don't want to expose anybody, but we have heard beyond the pharma companies, I would say some of our largest computer companies and internet companies. We've heard from them as well. And I'll tell you one that we've heard. One area is pilots. We have heard from some pilots, and are they concerned? They think that, they have to pass their medicals. And, if they don't pass the medical, they can't fly. And, their careers depend on passing those medicals and staying up to date. And they are very worried about the impact of the vaccine. And I think they're right to be worried. Again, a lot of them are very healthy young people. And a lot of them, pilots have really, they're running packages all over the country for FedEx and UPS, and they're flying people all over the place. And, gosh, we don't want them having heart problems in the cockpit. They don't want to lose their careers or have to stop flying. So that's a very interesting issue. So it's great to, I like where I'm sitting in terms of I'm getting a lot of very interesting information across this country. We are hearing from out-of-state people, by the way. So we've gone a little bit national. I can tell you we've heard from people in New York City, Texas, California. It's astounding. It's astounding. So,
well, we've been bringing together a lot of people who are very frustrated and need help, and we've been looking for help for a long time. So lucky you.
Well, gosh, there was one more thing I wanted to say. It'll come to me in a minute.
One question I wanted to ask about for instance, with the banding together, what kinds of groups should people be trying to pull together in terms of, for instance, Fed workers, because that's quite a large group of people. And can it just be general Fed workers coming together, or does it need to be certain sections of the federal government, things of that nature? What kinds of groups are the most efficient kind of groups for people to come together in?
They need to be whatever area of the federal government you're coming from, you need to be under at least similar rules. So as long as you're under similar rules in your sector, so military obviously is specialized, it's got its own set of rules. The other area, so make sure you get a group together within your own area, similar rules, so that we're able to address everybody at once.
So what about subcontractors too? Because that, as far as I understood, there was a new rule that went into effect, I think, October 12th, that started to affect subcontractors, federal subcontractors.
It did, and we're hearing from them too. And we're hearing from military contractors too.
Yes.
So
subcontractors of all varieties could come together, or would it have to start going under different departments? Or
again, it's going to be by the by the zone that you're working in. They could come together. I mean, I would love to see, companies are already a group themselves. A company by definition is kind of a group. You've got a lot of employees, you got, managers, et cetera. I would love to see a company that was willing to risk its federal contracts. And that, believe me, that's the problem. There are very few companies that want to risk those federal contracts. Southwest Air, I believe, has 3% of its flying is federal contracting. A company like that, where it's a small part, they could probably afford to stand up to the federal government and let that contract go. I mean, think about it this way. I mean, the federal government flies people all over the place for, federal employees, military, all over the place all the time with all the airlines. If all the airlines just said, hey, we're going to give up the contract, well, guess what? The federal government would be grounded at that point. Not the airlines. They'll survive. They can keep flying, and they can keep flying without putting their employees at risk and putting their pilots at risk and putting their passengers at risk if a pilot had an incident, obviously. So, that's the kind of thing I hope people will start to wake up. And even if you shut down, look at what's happening in the hospitals right now. When you have 100 nurses or hospital personnel leave because they don't want to take the vaccine, that hospital's in crisis. Hospitals, want to, they want to be full. They want to have everybody working hard all the time. So they're sort of at their limits most of the time and most of the year. You take 100 people out of it, you take 5% or 2% of their workforce out, everything is in crisis right now. And I just heard a terrible story today about a local hospital and what's going on and the lack of care and the lack of ability to treat patients. And I know it's a hospital that mandated the vaccine, and they've lost a bunch of nurses. They can't even hire traveling nurses. The traveling nurses don't want to come because they don't want to be vaxxed. This is just a self-created crisis, and they didn't need to be there, and here they are. So what I'm saying is, it doesn't take the majority of us to go along. A minority of us who choose to resist change the whole framework of everything. Everything's at its limits in a lot of ways. So you pull 3%, 5% away, things are all of a sudden falling apart. We need everybody. And if we're going to exclude some chunk of our population, we're not going to do very well as a country.
Well, unless they pick us apart one by one, and that's the trick. So
stand together.
Stand together. All right. I hope that's good information for those out there who are frustrated, because there are a lot. How to start taking action, and that yes, there's at least one set of lawyers out there actually acting on our behalf and winning too.
Well, thanks to Lisa for giving us the privilege of representing her. We won one. So it's nice to win a case.
Yes, absolutely.
So.
All right. Anything else you guys would like to add tonight?
No, I think we ran over what we discussed, Catherine.
Well, when you said 30 minutes, what did I do? I just laughed. I just laughed. I didn't say no.
It went by very quickly. I'm looking at our count. They're up I hadn't looked at it the whole time, basically. I'm here for an hour and 23 minutes. We'll see what kind of trouble we get into for this broadcast or cast anyway.
Well, thank you both very, very much for coming on and telling us really this great and hopeful news. I mean, we all need that hopeful news right now. We all feel so separated and so helpless. And knowing that, Lisa's case went through and came to such a great conclusion, such a simple conclusion, and that there is action. I mean, there is movement. There is some ways forward. And so now we can hopefully start to act on that, coming together in our little groups and start filling up Warner's voicemail box some more.
Yeah. There's no room, but what you just said is really the key. I think I've been saying it, but I just want to emphasize it. The way to attack this is through simplicity. And we are really, there are some very simple principles, and it's going to be very hard to wiggle away from those simple principles. I think we can hold people to simple principles. And that's, and I've said this to you before. I mean, our lawsuits are narrowly targeted. the issues, even in Lisa's case. We had other issues we could have raised. We raised one.
Mhm.
And, that's, I just, for other lawyers out there, I mean, we're going to have, our pleadings are available. Anybody who wants our research, our pleadings, and you're an attorney, call us. We'll try to give you a priority and get you in here. You can have the research, get up to speed, have the pleadings, have our analysis. We're giving it away to any lawyer who wants it. Frankly, we're going to have it up on the web anyway. Anybody could grab it, but lawyers who know what to do with it exactly, we're here to help you. We need to duplicate ourselves because there's not enough here to go around. So, Catherine, and I know you know how it's going, but thank you so much again for having us on.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Highly appreciated on my side as well, and I'm certain for my viewers as well, because we need it. We need it too. So, thank you everyone for joining us for the hour and a half long 30 minutes. And good night, everyone.
All right. Good night. Good night, Lisa. Good night, Catherine.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye.